Thank you, everybody, for getting on today and joining us for our Pizza Industry Council happy hour. My name is Eric Greenwald. I am the president of Grimaldi's. I am coming to you from Palm Beach, Florida. I'm out of Scottsdale, but I'm down here scouting out some new locations and taking advantage of what's been going on in the industry out here in Florida. But real quick, I wanted to give for those who are new to the happy hour, real quick, I wanted to give you a little background of why Jeff and I and Lo and the NRA are doing this. About 6 years ago, a group of us got together, and actually we got together not on a Zoom, but we actually were together in a room, which is unusual nowadays. But we were talking about how do we get the pizza industry together? How do we improve this segment, this part of the market? And a woman by the name of Marla Topleth, who used to be the president of Rosati, she's retired since, got us together. She led the industry, the council, and what we call the PIC, Pizza Industry Council. And we got together. Really, the goal or the vision of the group was to get together and help those who might be getting into the industry, help those who are in the industry currently who might be struggling a little, help those in the industry that are doing well, but how can we continue to do better? And just it was really just all about how do we make this segment the best we can. We never really shared any trade secrets or not. It was really about just improving what we do in the industry in our segment of pizza. So then today, Jeff and I actually, Jeff Goodman, he'll introduce himself in a minute. He and I have been doing this with the council from literally the beginning. And over the last year, Jeff and I have got together and co-chair with obviously Lowe's help from the NRA, and we've been working on this and came up with this great idea of the happy hour. Today we have a great speaker, Jack, Jeff will introduce as well, and we'll go. We're going to be doing this every month, and every month we're going to have a new topic. The topic's really going to be about what's current and what's going on in the industry that everybody will feel is relevant. And we all know nowadays things are changing by the minute. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and great to see some familiar faces on the happy hour today. I'm Jeff Goodman. I'm the CEO of Fresh Brothers Pizza out here in LA. We're a 21-unit chain based here in Southern California, and hope everybody is selling a ton of pizza for those of you who are on the call. As Eric mentioned, we've been at this for a little while, and this is something kind of more of a labor of love. We all love this business. We all love this segment of the restaurant industry, and are committed to doing what we can to help grow it and help make others successful as well. With that, I think one of the things we bring to the table are great resources for us all to learn from. And our speaker today, Jack Li, is one of those experts in the field who I think is going to present some information today that is probably going to challenge our way of thinking and be really insightful. So Jack has got the dubious title of Haiku Master for a company called Datassential, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. I never got past the level of amateur or private, I think, with Haiku, but he's attained the title of Haiku Master. Yes. So with that, we're thrilled to have Jack. It's great to have that resource being brought to the table today. I'll say it for him. All these sessions that we do are meant to be very interactive. So I'm sure Jack will reiterate this, but as you have questions, as you have feedback, or want to share thoughts about what you're experiencing in the industry, again, utilize Jack, myself, Eric, or your peers on this call to ask questions and don't leave any stone unturned today in terms of seeking a little bit more knowledge. So with that, Jack, I'll turn it over to you and you can kind of drive us through this.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, Eric. And thank you, Lo. And hey, everyone. So I do have one request. You don't have to comply, but if you're able to, great. If you're in a place where you could turn on your camera, it would be awesome to turn on your camera so we could all see each other. Our hope is that over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, this is more of a conversation than it is just a presentation. And I think it's way better if we're all contributing and asking questions and throwing out ideas as we go. So please don't feel like we're locked into just the words that are going to come out of my mouth and the images that are on the slides I'm about to present. Let's make this a dialogue. And I would challenge you to challenge me. If you see something that you're like, I don't really know if that makes much sense, or can you dig deeper into that? Just blurt it out. Let's make this as organic of a conversation as possible. So I see I'm not the only person that's sort of on the move right now as we do this. So that's sort of cool. I guess we call it a happy hour, but some of us are driving. Let's not mix and match those things too much, I guess. But if you can turn on your camera, let's get those cameras going. As Jeff mentioned, I'm with a company called Datassential. We provide insights to the food industry with a pretty heavy focus on food service, and we're really happy to be doing something specifically for all of you in the pizza segment. So we're going to talk about a couple topics today, and I've only prepared enough material to get us going for some conversation, right? So this is really more incumbent on all of us to contribute thoughts, ideas, and pushback if we can over the next 40 minutes. So let's dive into it. There have been a lot of questions around what the heck is going on with the industry. You know, are restaurants opening? Are they closing? What does recovery look like? We maintain a data set that we call Firefly. It's a product that we offer, and basically it tracks every place that serves food in the country, every restaurant, every pizza shop, every hotel, every hospital, you name it. And then one of the things we've been doing since the onset of the pandemic is tracking on a weekly basis what's open and what's closed. And you can learn a lot by looking at that opening/closure data specifically for restaurants. And the question is, where do you see variance and what's driving closures? Plus, are we pretty much back to fully open at this point? And I want to share just a couple of quick highlights and maybe challenge us to think about what this means, not just for our segment, but for the industry more broadly. So in this table that I have up right now, you can see restaurant closure rates in May. Then we're showing what they look like in July, and then September of last year, then December of last year. And there's 3 columns of information, right? What percentage of all restaurants that were open pre-pandemic were temporarily closed at that time? What percentage had just shut their doors permanently for good? And then what's the cumulative number between those two? And as you can see, in the early days of the pandemic, we had a lot of places that were temporarily closed because we're a month in. A lot of places had reopened already. Some are like, yeah, we're not so sure what we're going to do, but not many places that say, hey, we just give up. But as we proceed month after month after month, by the time we get to the end of 2020, we're at a point where about only 2.5% of restaurants that were open pre-pandemic were temporarily closed with the thought that they may eventually reopen. But the percentage of restaurants that had permanently shut down exceeded 9%, and cumulatively we're at about 11.5, 12% closed as of December 2020. If we look at the most recent data, right, April of 2021, basically this month, this is where we are right now. We're at about 11% of restaurants have now completely closed. So we actually had a pretty large gain from December to April. Another 1.5% of restaurants just sort of shut their door permanently, and about 13% in total of pre-pandemic restaurants are now closed in some way, shape, or form. And if you sort of follow the trend here, you can see it makes absolute sense, right? You had a lot of temporary closures early on, and eventually the permanent closures start to sort of add up. And if you think about, how many restaurants have closed in the course of a year, we basically closed at about double the historic average for restaurants, right? So we had about 11% of restaurants closed in about a year following the pandemic. Normally that number is around 5%. And the thing that you might find sort of surprising is, look, I'm in Florida right now. I mentioned to Eric and Jeff and Lo before this call officially started that we were walking around Atlantic Avenue and Delray Beach, and it's shocking how open it is, right? Super, just super open. And throughout the pandemic, with all the different policies we've had from different states and local municipalities, you would expect that at this point we would see a pretty dramatic difference from state to state in terms of restaurant survival rate, like what percentage of restaurants manage to stay open at this point in time. What you actually see instead, if you look at that red part of each one of these lines over here, that's the percentage of restaurants in each state that have closed permanently during the pandemic at some point. There is a little bit of variance, but it's not crazy amounts, right? It's not like Florida's at 2% and New York's at 50% or anything extreme like that. They're all sort of hovering around that 9, 10, 11, 12% range. You do have a couple of outliers, like DC, for instance, is much more closed than other places, but we've been surprised to see that, restaurants basically have normalized across vast geographic regions, right? This is really a story of adaptability. Despite what the local policy might be or what state shutdown policy may be, restaurants typically have found a way to adapt and survive as best they can. So you start seeing things sort of level out across states. And what's interesting is if you look at the biggest metros, these are the 20 largest metros across the US based on total size. And we then looked at those top 20 and we ranked them by the percentage of restaurants that have closed during the pandemic, even at the metro level, right? Not just whole states, but major city areas, you don't see a ton of variance either, right? From 12.7% down to 9% and some change. That doesn't really change too much either. So we do see a lot of adaptability there. Now, where you start seeing dramatic variance in geography, it's not at the state level, it's not at the metro level, and here's the implication for us, it's at the really local level, the zip code level. So if we look at, there are about 30,000 zip codes in the country. If we look at just zip codes that have at least 100 restaurants in them, these are the most closed zip codes as of basically a couple weeks ago, right? And you can look at the closure rate that we have. The Embarcadero area of San Francisco, the financial district of San Francisco, the Chicago Loop, downtown Minneapolis, and some other areas, you have like 40+% of restaurants straight up closed, which is way higher than that national average that we saw of about 12%. Massively different, right? So these are the most closed sizable zip codes across the country. How about the least closed ones, the most open? Look at the percentage that are closed there. It's like tiny, 2%, 3%, 4%. So you're getting like a 10x increase in closures at the very, very local level.
Hey, Jack, quick question for you.
Yeah.
What would a normal run rate be on permanent closures? Do you have any insight on what that would be? What would a normal, you're going to have something over the course of a period of time.
Historically, it's like 5 to 6% in a year, right? And you have some places that might open up and they don't even make it to a year, but typically you'll see about 5 to 6% close in the course of a year. And we saw about double of that in the pandemic. There's been a lot of news about how 80% of restaurants are closing up, or, and there've been a lot of sort of fear stories. It didn't really end up being true, right? Closures have not been that dramatic. Now, that's not to say business hasn't been impacted. It's been extremely tough for a lot of restaurants, and specifically, it's been tough for independent restaurants. Chains as a whole have done well, and pizza chains, depending on their orientation, have done particularly well in some cases. But again, it is not a universal rule, right? If you were a pizza place that has been oriented for delivery from day one and known for it, and you had a really good app in there and so on, you probably did pretty well. If you're more of a sit-down full-service pizza place, and that's, the experience is all about that, it was probably a little bit tougher. So we definitely saw more closures, as you would expect, but it's not been, from a closure perspective, the horror show that some had predicted. From a business perspective, it has been obviously extremely challenging. So many restaurants pushed to the brink, but adapting and finding a way to cut costs and to survive. But the survival rate has actually been pretty decent throughout the pandemic. We didn't have like half of all restaurants close, and you can see that, right? I mean, think of your stores. I'm guessing not half of your stores have closed. In fact, some of you may be growing. Drive around your local area. Look at all the restaurants that are around you. Does it seem like half of them have closed? Probably not. On average, it's probably about 12 to 13%. The implication, though, is you really want to look at where you are specifically geographically, where your stores are. It's not a state story. It's not even a city or metro level story. It's really a local story. There are things to consider. The Chicago Loop, for instance, super densely populated. And I'm gonna bring this back to us for a moment, but I thought we could maybe look at cuisine types for a second too. This is the percentage of all restaurants of various cuisine types that have closed. And if you're a buffet restaurant, you've had a really tough time for obvious reasons. Wing places, Thai food places, which are often family run, and they just sort of say we're gonna fight through it. And then bagel places are among the ones that are most likely to be open. What's surprising is that pizza is only sort of in the middle of that pack. About 12% of all pizza restaurants, including both full service and limited service, have closed during the pandemic, right? Relatively speaking, that's probably higher than we may have normally expected coming into this, because pizza is such a deliverable food. And we think that on average, it would have huge advantages. But again, this goes back to the earlier point that it really depends on the orientation of your particular pizza business. If you're more of a full service experience, you've probably had more closures. But pizza overall has done okay. Limited service delivery pizza has done particularly well. So I actually want to go back to another thought, and I'm going to talk to this rather than show a piece of data. When we think about where your stores are, there are certain types of areas that are just going to have a really hard time recovering. We sometimes look at a stat that we call the variable population ratio, which is the ratio of the number of people that work in an area compared to the number of people that live in an area. So you imagine if we go back here to like that Chicago loop, not a lot of people live in the loop, right? That's downtown Chicago. It's all high-rise office buildings and just office buildings basically, but a ton of people work in the loop. What does the future look like for work, for white collar work? For all of you that work traditionally in an office, do you expect to be in an office 5 days a week going forward? Does your staff expect to be? Most don't, right? And if you look at preference data, the vast majority of workers say, hey, we'd like to, if we can, just go to the office 1 or 2 days a week forever. Basically, not just now, but in perpetuity. And if you look at expectations, it's pretty close. Most of them expect that they'll be doing something like that 1, 2, 3 days a week. So essentially, we're going to suck away a lot of people from certain zip codes or certain local areas. The Chicago Loop, not a lot of people live there. And if half the working population disappears, what type of restaurants can we support? Can we support as many restaurants as we have now? It's going to be really tough. There's a reason why 40% of those restaurants still haven't opened back up yet. So look at these specific areas in which you have stores and ask yourself, post-pandemic, after everything's safe, do we think this is going to be a thriving area again in terms of either daytime working population or resident population? But if it's one of those areas where it's all office workers, not a lot of people live there, those places probably are not going to come back to what they were previously. And those are the types of stores where you probably say, you know what, maybe this is more of a delivery location where we have to expand our radius that will deliver to a little bit further, because where we're located right now, there's just not a lot of people next to our store physically, and that's probably not going to come back at some point. We could look in our Firefly data and actually go a step further and see, what are the types of workers in that area? Are they people working in healthcare or government jobs or manufacturing, like blue collar, or are they in what they call professional services, white collar? The white collar stuff is the stuff that's going to be most dramatically impacted. So again, it's not a one size fits all thing. You really have to look at a super local level to understand the prognosis. Now, that said, about 90% of consumers say they've actually changed their delivery behavior as a result of COVID. That's not a surprise. And if you look at those that say they've increased their usage of delivery, whether it's first party or third party, versus those that say they've decreased it, it's clear increases across the board. It doesn't matter what type of consumer you are, you're very likely to have used delivery more as a result of the pandemic. And this is not just people jumping on delivery for the very first time. A lot of it is people that were previously getting one food restaurant delivery a month previously, and now doing it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, sometimes people doing it multiple times in the course of a single day. And the question is, do we think this is just going to magically disappear post-pandemic, or have we habitualized the use of delivery in some way, which is certainly the argument that I would make. I think we will see people return back to dine-in to some extent, but we're not going to give back all of the delivery gains. Some of this is going to become habitualized behavior for the long run. And the question is, what does this actually mean in terms of the types of foods that people are going to eat, and where does pizza sort of play into that? So we've taken a subset of that Firefly data set, and we've isolated what we call the Firefly 500, which is the 500 most notable, sizable chains across the country. And we wanted to look at just those big chains. We have a really great report called the Firefly 500 report. And I want to share something that I thought was quite interesting from this. So we looked at the period of time between June 2020 and December 2020. And what you're seeing here as numbers, I apologize for the eye chart, is the percentage of chain restaurants, big chain restaurants that offered delivery. So not the chain as a whole, but percentage of chain locations among those top 500 chains that offer delivery. And you can see the dramatic, massive increase in delivery availability among chains that from June through December of last year. right? You know, those limited service salad chains, only 33% of their stores in June offered delivery. By the time we got to December, it was almost 80%. It more than doubled, right? And you have similarly large gains for many other types of restaurants too. But if you look at the pizza segment, limited service pizza, full service Italian / pizza, you don't have nearly the same size gains, largely because delivery was already a pretty big part of that business. It was already offered by most of those places, right? You're starting from a much higher base, so not many more incremental units offered added delivery in the latter part of last year. Whereas some of these other segments, dessert places, sandwich places, Mexican places, etc., there was a much larger lift in the availability of delivery. So what does that mean? Well, it would suggest on a relative basis, pizza's share of delivery enabled locations has shrunk as a result of the pandemic, right? A lot of places, pizza places offered delivery before the pandemic. Not a lot of other places, you know, offered them as much among these large chains. But as the pandemic raged on, delivery got added faster to non-pizza chains than to pizza chains. So pizza's share of the pie, so to speak, in terms of units that offer delivery, has shrunk on a relative basis. It's grown on an absolute basis in terms of numbers of locations that offer delivery, but relative to the entire industry, it's gotten a little bit smaller. So just know that there's going to be increased competition for delivery foods from places beyond the pizza segment, because there's just so many more places that offer delivery now. This is chains, and this is true of independents too. The other thing that's really quite interesting is so much of the conversation has been around third party, and for progressive chains that want to do something, you know, on a first party basis, that too, but it's all sort of the digital app-based stuff. Let us not forget that there's still a pretty healthy percentage of consumers that actually prefer to order via the phone. And if you look at certain generations, it becomes actually pretty significant. Among boomers, 61% of boomers say phone is my number way I want to order restaurant delivery. We sort of forget about that sometimes. And if you dig a little deeper with even younger generations, Xers, Y, and Z, they'll sometimes say, yeah, I like ordering from an app, but if I really want to make sure human being actually tell me that they got my special request in and they heard what I had to say, versus typing something into that notes box on the delivery app and you have no idea if that request is going to be read or honored. So let's not forget that the phone is still a valid, viable thing, but it does target a specific generation, that being boomers. So if your market is more boomer heavy, don't forget the phone. The other thing to note is if you look at what people have ordered for delivery over the last month, yeah, pizza leads the pack. But if we looked at this same chart a year ago, the gap between pizza and everything else would have been significantly larger, right? So pizza is still number one by margin, but that margin has shrunk on a relative basis over the course of the last year because so many other categories of food have been uplifted as people latch on to delivery and more places offer delivery. As it stands today, something like 70 to 75% of all restaurants offer delivery in some way, shape, or form. That number would have been unheard of just a couple of years ago, or even just a year ago. So the number of places that we're competing with for delivery food is much higher. You know, I don't personally think a burger delivers well, but a lot of people have ordered burgers for delivery. And this is starting to manifest a little bit in what consumers believe travels well as a food. Let me ask you this, and maybe this is a question for discussion. What is it about a pizza in your mind that makes it travel better than other types of food? I mean, you're the pizza experts. You tell me.
Probably say for me, Jack, I would say that for me, it would be that you can reheat it. In my opinion, when you look at even the top 5 or 6 there, obviously take the salad out, wings, burgers, Chinese food. I think reheating pizza, doing it right, and whether you're toast or whatever, I think it's easier. The other thing too, and I know a lot of people on the phone will say this, is that I love cold pizza, so I don't necessarily have to reheat it. I'll eat pizza cold. I would not eat a burger or Chinese food cold.
It is interesting though, right? Like I think there was a little bit of a pause, and I don't think we necessarily all jumped to the conclusion that the pizza is going to necessarily arrive hotter than every other food on this list. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You see chicken wings in number 4 slot right there, and I don't know if we have grilled chicken quite a bit further down. Um, is there something about the wing in terms of the shape of the chicken that makes it deliver better than another format of chicken? Consumers think it does, right? And the question is, why do consumers think that pizza delivers really well, or that wings deliver really well, for instance? It's because they've done it so many times, right? They've internalized that. They've said, oh yeah, I now think of it as a delivery food. More people are being exposed to more foods for delivery. Over time, they will start thinking that more foods deliver and travel, period, end of story. And the competitive set for pizza will only increase as a result. It used to be pizza and a massive gap between it and anything else. And wings was actually the number 2 item. I think as recently as 3 or 4 items and 4 years ago in terms of what consumers thought traveled well. Now it's pizza, and then you got Chinese food there, you got burgers up there, then wings, and you have a slew of other stuff too. The numbers for these other categories will continue to travel upward over time as more consumers have experience with them with delivery. Some of those experiences are terrible, to be sure, but you can bet that many restaurants and packaging companies are working on ways to make delivery better. So again, I think the competitive set for delivery food is going to continue to increase. Pizza has, I believe, is an internal lead unless we do something to really maintain or maybe grow it. So we thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about virtual brands. I know, I guess for us, the distinction between what you call a ghost kitchen and a virtual brand, to us, a ghost kitchen is essentially an incremental physical kitchen that exists only for the preparation of delivery. A virtual brand, meanwhile, it's only, and that food is prepared out of an existing restaurants. And you all see virtual brands being a massive opportunity, and they certainly are. It's what's going to drive growth for the industry. We said 6-7 years ago when we saw the infrastructure being built out for the delivery platforms that delivery was the single best opportunity the restaurant industry will see for a very long time to bring in double-digit growth and steal share from eating at home. Virtual brands to us has the same type of roadmap, massive opportunity, but there's a chance that we're going to totally screw this thing up, and we want to be careful that we do not screw this thing up. So let's talk about some of the potential pitfalls with virtual brands and what we need to do to make sure we don't step on a landmine and squander this fairly amazing opportunity we have in front of us. So first, if we look back at October of last year, so not that long ago, about 35% of consumers said they were familiar with the idea or the concept of a virtual brand, right? Whether it's, it's just wings or something that a celebrity did. About a third of the population. In just a few months, we had a really large increase from 35% to 50%, which is an enormous gain for that short of a period of time. And then what percentage of consumers have actually ordered from a virtual brand? That too has lifted very dramatically from 23% to 34% again in just about 5 months. You never see numbers change this fast when it comes to the restaurant industry. We're not the high-tech industry, we're the restaurant industry, and normally numbers don't change that quickly. But here, these are really, really dramatic gains. So this thing is exploding, if you will. And we want to understand from a consumer's perspective, like, hey, what type of virtual brands are you, interested in? Yeah, and there's a whole slew. And I think we're at a very interesting time right now where virtual brands are sort of like the next extension of social media in a way. I mean, look at some of the virtual brands that are debuting. You had Mr. Beast Burger a while ago. That's been very successful for a lot of the restaurants that participated. Mario Lopez now says he's going to have his virtual brand. Pauly D from Jersey Shore has a virtual sub shop as well. And the list is going to go on and on. Any crazy idea you could think of will manifest as a virtual brand at some point. And the question is, will the novelty eventually wear off? And are we going to burn people out, and how do we avoid doing it? So we ask consumers, what type of virtual brands are you interested in, right? And interesting, a lot of people said, hey, virtual brand connected with a charity of some sort. I've not seen that one yet. We're all very profit driven, but I've not seen the charity driven, the charity based virtual restaurant brand yet. But a lot of people say, hey, that sounds good to me. And even if we look at the tail end of this, and like not a lot of people say I'm interested in a politician based virtual brand, thank God. It would not surprise me if some politician found a way to monetize their name a little bit, right?
Who would do that?
Who would do that?
Yeah.
Pelosi's House of Pierogies, Schumer's House of Shawarma. We could do all sorts of things with this, and they would probably find some sort of an audience. This is the world that we are marching forward into, and the question is, do we want it to be a world dominated by novelty, where we're literally eating Pelosi food or Pauly D food or something, or are we going to we're going to try to avoid that mistake? And I would argue that it would be a mistake if we went only down that road. If we look at consumers that say, hey, I'd like to be doing a virtual brand that's connected with a movie, give me the Star Wars Creature Cantina virtual restaurant of some sort. You could see that the difference in opinion changes pretty dramatically by generation, right? Boomers, I don't like that idea. But Gen Y, millennials and Gen Z, they love the idea. And then, if we say, well, how about something based on a celebrity chef? Now all of a sudden you have similar numbers across the board by generation, but if you change the chef, the numbers completely change as well. Think about your brands, right? You have to basically serve so many multiple audiences, right? You can't get super specific with your brick and mortar brand that you target only one very particular type of person and exclude everybody else. You're just not doing that, right? It would be terrible business because you have to manage the veto vote and all of the above. But with a virtual brand, you can get ultra specific. Could a Pauly D's Italian sub shop exist in the brick and mortar world? No, because 99% of America probably is just not interested in that. But you can get super laser targeted on a virtual basis because the startup costs are, basically very tiny compared to that. So the real benefit as we see it for virtual brands is you could target audiences with laser-like precision, and consumers will even tell you, I like the idea of a virtual brand, even if you made it something like a limited time restaurant even. Forget LTOs for your menu. Think about a limited time restaurant where you're flipping over an entire new brand every 2 to 3 months. You maintain the novelty. Hopefully you do something really interesting with the food too. But I think we're headed there as an industry. And I think there is the potential peril that we're going to overly rely on just novelty, right? This month it's Mario Lopez. Next month it's the most obscure soap opera star. And that's not going to get us very, very far. It'll be interesting for a while, but eventually it's going to suck unless we make the food interesting too. So let's look at some of the pitfalls, right? 92% of consumers say, hey, I like this idea of virtual brands, but you better identify them. I don't want to feel like I've been swindled somehow. I don't want to feel like I'm ordering from this amazing, Neapolitan pizza place that's super duper authentic, and it turns out the food is made in this crappy pizza restaurant that I really don't like that's around the corner from me, right? And 73% say, hey, I want to know specifically which restaurant is preparing that food. And I think, DoorDash and Grubhub, they're now identifying, and Uber Eats too, I believe, virtual brands directly in the app and say, hey, this food is being prepared out of another kitchen. Click here to learn more about how this works. But it's still, not at the very, very top. It's not, flashing lights to really tell you. And oftentimes the restaurant itself is not identified. Consumers want that level of transparency. And I think we have to find a way to offer that to them, or there will be backlash at some point. And the other thought is, look, a lot of those virtual brands, the menus are basically the same. They're not that different. You have a lot of wing places right now, and they all offer wings. They all offer basically very similar flavors of wings, or even if they're different, they're not so different that it makes someone say, ooh, I really like the taste of this one versus that one. Consumers are trying virtual brands right now because the brand sounds interesting, but that novelty, again, only goes so far. We have to bring innovation back to this process, right? We have to make those menus interesting if we want this thing to be long-standing. Like, imagine if you were doing LTOs and your only basis for an LTO is, oh yeah, here's an interesting name for this new item, but the underlying product is the same thing you offer every day on your menu. Right? No one's going to go for that. Right? We're doing that literally right now with virtual brands, and that novelty will wear off unless we make the underlying food items more interesting. So I thought we could take a few minutes and talk about the implications around innovation, because that ultimately is a solution. Let's stay ahead of the game. Let's stay ahead of all these other places that are delivering food. How do we make pizza, which is literally America's most loved dish? So we have a system called Flavor, where we track everything you eat or drink, every food, flavor, ingredient, you name it. And among dishes, pizza is the #1 most loved dish in America by a pretty big margin too. It's like pizza is #1, and then everything else is pretty far behind. So what do we do with the most loved dish? Well, you have a blank canvas to do whatever the heck you want with it. People will flock to pizza knowing it's pizza. You know, how bad could it be? And I think we have creative license to do more creative things with pizza too, and we could do it better than other places that are just starting to get into the game. So the way we like to think about trends is along what we call a 4-stage life cycle, and they follow the first stage we call inception. So that's when, you know, a really early stage restaurant or a fine dining place maybe brings a trend onto its menu. Then adoption is typically when fast casual or higher end casual dining gets involved. Proliferation, that purple stage on the left there, that's when things are sort of like really in, you know, most casual dining chain restaurants at that point. And finally, ubiquity, like that trend is basically everywhere, right? It's just completely ordinary at that point. So you can see some of the mega trends we're seeing with pizza on the left, from plant-forward pizzas and pizzas that sort of replicate Italian street food in that inception stage, all the way to the ubiquitous stuff. You can also see some of the most common ingredients you'll find on pizza menus or on pizzas. In that middle chart and on the chart to the right, you can see what's actually growing the fastest on pizza menus. So the middle stuff, yeah, not so interesting, right? We're doing all that already, but the stuff on the right becomes a little bit more interesting. Short rib pizza, or pizzas with vegan cheese, or cauliflower crust, or using heirloom tomatoes or brisket, and the list sort of goes on and on. You literally have a blank canvas to do whatever the hell you want on a pizza. And there is no single food platform more than pizza that is the absolute archetype for what we call fuse-biquity. You know, it's taking a ubiquitous item that everyone loves like pizza and infusing it with other trends and flavors, often from around the world, to make it more interesting. It is the best platform for safe experimentation for a consumer. Take something you love, like a pizza, that makes it safe, and experiment with new twists on it. So we can look at maybe some of those, you know, mega trends that we're seeing, right? Pizza that, you know, replicates Italian street food, whether it's Neapolitan or Sicilian types of pizzas. We're seeing this start to pop up in a lot more restaurants, both pizza restaurants and Italian places, and sometimes on higher end casual dining restaurant menus, as well as regional styles of pizza. Detroit pizza, still small, but has basically doubled in menu penetration, menu availability over the last 4 years. So small, but growing at a really, really fast rate. Or this notion that pizza can be actually a pretty mindful meal, that it's, we could call, I guess we could use healthy as the term there. Some of these things don't look obviously healthy, but they have a health aspect to them, right? Even that crazy looking thing in the bottom right-hand corner, it's keto friendly. It targets a specific diet. The crust is literally sausage in this case, or a cauliflower crust, right? Or vegan cheese on that French fry pizza that we see. And even if this is not completely to your personal taste, just know that all these things are now floating out there in the wild. And what they really have in common is they all target specific ways that consumers eat. Not just the general, hey, I want to be a little more healthy, but, oh, I'm on a keto diet, or I'm gluten-free, or I'm trying to, or I like the idea of cauliflower crust. And then mashups, obviously. Now, I personally find some of these too strange to try myself, but it doesn't mean that they're not out there and they aren't popular in a lot of cases. So think of this as more an inspiration. We don't have anyone from Tony Baloney's on this call, do we? Thank God, because I'm going to say right now, that's probably not for me, that item right there. That's just a little bit too crazy in my mind. But these things are there. That pizza egg waffle, that weird taco thing. That Tony Baloney thing looks like a bunch of tacos sitting on a crust. It's like they used the taco, the pizza crust as a tray for a tray of tacos. But that is neither here nor there. But we're seeing a lot of these sort of mashed up things where it's like pizza infused with something else. And you have this whole new creation. That's becoming popular. And if we look inside a data set we have called Scores, which takes all the new items and LTOs that appear on menus from big chains, and we actually test them all with consumers, here's some of the ones that have tended to score pretty well. And these are just some example among hundreds of new pizzas that have debuted on menus over the last year. Panera got into the pizza game recently, and consumers on reacting to that concept said, hey, we like the idea. There's a lot of people interested in it. That's that first metric, unbranded PI, which is unbranded purchase intent, would you order it or not? Not thought to be super unique, but huge amounts of interest in the underlying product. Then you look at something like that pizza from Blaze, that blazing hot chicken pizza, right? The purchase intent is a little bit more moderate, but the uniqueness is thought to be really, really high. It's 5-star uniqueness. Or that Jalapopin pizza, which sort of says to you, yeah, that pizza not only has an interesting name, but it's described in a very interesting way as well. And then that nothing but stuffed crust from Pizza Hut. And the list goes on and on. There's literally hundreds of these. And you can see all these sort of interesting takes on pizza that consumers all tend to love in some way, shape, or form. We could continue on and look at, what sauces and flavors are trending. And there's a lot here, right? Garlic Parmesan on pizza is up. Aioli is up. Honey, I actually love hot honey on pizza. That's growing as well. I'm not so sure about those people putting Thousand Island on a pizza, but who am I to judge? But you could see some of these inspirational pizzas, a Reuben pizza from this place in Boston, or there's that hot honey going on that pizza with pepperoni. Short rib pizza in Davenport, Iowa. Burrata on a pizza. Burrata is a fast growing cheese on pizza. And this one's a little bit too strange. Menu. That these things are floating out there. These are expressions of, what? If I said, hey, would you like to have some okonomiyaki as a typical consumer? What would you say? Probably no thanks, right? In most cases, you'd probably say no thanks. But if I say okonomiyaki pizza, now more of you will say, yeah, I'd give that thing a try, because it's still a pizza at the end of the day. And that really is the story. More competition from other places that are offering up delivery foods. That virtual brands are getting to be a little bit gimmicky, and we need to do more interesting things with our menu. So this is it. Innovation is the way forward from this situation. And there's just lots of ways to innovate. And pizza is like the single best category to do it in, even more so than burgers. The other thing I would remind us of is if you look at the things that people love on a pizza, so we're still looking at pizza ingredients and where they turn up, there is a lot of regional influence. So if your stores are just in a certain part of the country, or if you have stores nationwide, you either want to maybe say, hey, let's focus our menu on what's particularly popular in that area. Or if you have stores nationwide, you might say, hey, at these stores, let's do more Italian beef and giardiniera, right? That's a Midwestern thing. In the Northeast, we're going to go with the broccoli rabe and the breaded eggplant on our pizza instead. You can tailor this, and pizza is one of those things where there's so many ingredients and toppings that are available, and they tend to be super regionalized to some extent. Now you have things like pepperoni and sausage that cut across every single place, but there are some more regional things which can say to a consumer, oh yeah, this place is really for me. It reflects my personal taste. If you're in St. Louis, you can do the thing with Provel cheese, I guess, if you want to get ultra. regional. That's what I got for us today. And I hope we can remember, even if our business has been really strong over the last year, and I hope it has been, know that there's a lot more competition coming down the pike if delivery is one of the things that you do. And if you're thinking about going into a virtual brand, get past the gimmick stuff and make sure you have a differentiated menu as well. You don't need it today necessarily because virtual brands are still sort of new and novel. But at some point, you don't want to be yet another place doing the same wings that many other places are already doing. I feel like that was a mouthful and I tend to talk a lot and I apologize. But if anyone has comments or questions, I'm happy to take them. It's an awkward silence that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's very normal.
Well, Jack, first of all, let me say on behalf of the whole group, we really appreciate you, sharing all that data. I think it's some really interesting thought starters for all of us to take a look at. I'm sure each one of us is kind of going through that process of reviewing what we just saw and saying, how does that apply to us and how can we leverage that data? But so I'll pause and see if anybody's been able to reflect on a question. And Fred Morgan looks really insightful and questioning. So, so we can call on him. But anybody else, who has got a question for Jack?
I just think that the data was very informative. And so I really liked it. I think I got a couple of takeaways from it. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Fred. From one driver to another. How's it going? If you're looking for any more information, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that you have my contact information. Look, we love your category. We love you as operators. And there's so much opportunity ahead right now. We just have to be careful which way we steer the ship.
Hey, Jack, I guess I have a question here. This is Aaron. I'm with Lido Pizza. You touched on the amount of consumers who are willing to embrace the use of an app.
Yeah.
What was some of that data? Could you repeat some of that data to me?
Yeah. So I'll give you a little background as well. So consumers are extremely open to using an app, and most already do. It is very generational, though. And if you talk to millennials and Z, a majority of them are willing to actually download an additional app to their already crowded phone if it's for a restaurant they really want, and they want to order from. So don't necessarily feel like you have to be wed to just what can be accomplished via third party. You could do a first party app, but it's got to be a fairly compelling app, right? And the argument is you may have to do that in the long run unless you're just really good at negotiating commissions with those third party platforms. The other piece is that app usage is highly dependent on which generation you're born into. Zs and millennials are actually fairly similar in that, they're essentially both digital natives, if you will. And Xers have actually learned pretty well to use technology too. It's not quite as familiar, but it's not totally foreign either. And they, for the most part, have joined. Where you see the biggest gap between the generations is between X and boomers, right? Xers have largely come along for the ride with technology, but boomers just fall off a cliff entirely. And this is true not just of restaurant app usage, but pretty much anything involving the use of modern technology. So think about your customer base, right? If you're a heavily boomer-oriented base, you probably have to do more stuff with telephone and more traditional methods. Like you're never going to bring some of those people onto the platform. It's just not going to happen. Now you might say, hey, if we wait long enough, some of those people may no longer be with us. That's that's probably true too, and it depends on what your horizon is. But the younger generations are not only interested in using apps, they're actually willing to add yet another app to their phone if it's worthwhile and from a restaurant they love.
I'll tell you where I'm really going with that question is we're actively pursuing our customer base. We're trying to get them to shift their ordering online because we have a heavy, we take a lot of phone calls. I chuckled when I saw that phone-in statistic because ours is very heavy. And, to increase throughput, we really want to shift these customers to an online or app, just get them ordering digitally. And we've been pushing very, very hard on that. And I can't say we've really come to a wall. We're beginning to think that maybe we have reached our penetration level. So what do you think that penetration level is, even if it's just nationally? I mean,
Well, I
I
would
feel
say-
like maybe we shouldn't be throwing any more money at this because I think we've gotten all that we've gotten. But
What
I
is
don't know. What do you
what's
think
your
that
customer like?
percentage?
Is it a younger customer, older customer? If you had to peg it,
Oh, our customers,
Yeah.
it's a 38-year-old mom with 2 kids. That's
Oh,
our
so that's
middle
like
of
the
the road
average-
customer.
the average person in the U.S. is 38 years old, so they're right there, right? So they're basically an older millennial / borderline Gen Xer at that point. If you're telling me you're getting 50% of your orders online, that would totally make sense. If you're telling me you're getting 10% and you think you've hit your limit, you're not at your limit, like not even close, I would expect. The question is, what would compel someone to do an online order? Is it mostly through a website you go to or via app right now?
So most of our customers won't download the app. They're going to the website. They're actually using the mobile
Yeah.
website.
Mobile website, yeah. So the question is, what's going to
Yep.
make the app compelling for them, right? And this is a whole other conversation about what makes for a great app that's super, super easy to use. You look at, I know maybe it's gimmicky, but like the Domino stuff where you had like the 0-click ordering and whatnot. How do you make this super simple? And if we actually just did some work on what consumers want from like an online ordering app, and there's some very, very basic things, right? The most important thing that most apps miss, including what's listed on third-party delivery, is having a really good picture for every item on the menu. So to me, that is absolutely essential, especially if you're doing a more interesting pizza where people just don't know maybe what that even looks like otherwise. But they want full descriptions, right? You want to think, do you have some of your customer base that if it's mom ordering for 2 kids, do they have, certain dietary things going on in their household? Can they maybe specify what those are and it filters their selections for them? If it's a mom that cares more about nutritionals, do you have nutritionals, not just calorie count, when maybe nutritionals attached to some of it? We have to give them a reason to use the app that's more compelling than using the mobile site. Is it possible that your mobile site is already so user friendly that there's no incremental benefit to going to the app? Like I always thought like the old Southwest Airlines website was like super easy to book a ticket on. I'm like, I don't need to download the app. It only takes me a second to use, their website, versus some other websites were like terrible at the time. Like, I better get the app. So you're competing against yourself in some cases. I don't know your particular situation, but if your number is closer to 10 than it is to 50, you're nowhere near your limit, because the percentage of consumers they say they prefer ordering through a digital property is, I think, like 70+% versus the phone.
So Jack, let me ask you a question on the phone aspect, in case you have
Yeah.
any data on this. You know what percentage of, or what the response would be from consumers for the use of AI on phone calls, or versus having a pure human interaction?
So there's two
Yeah, go ahead.
questions there, right? So we've done this research. One is AI, the other is a robo voice, right? And to me, they're different things, right? Good AI is something that serves up recommendations for you or
Correct. That's what I'm
customizes
talking
your
about.
experience. Robo voice, no one likes that.
No,
Like no one likes that unless you pair it
I'm
with
talking
AI.
true AI. Yeah, I'm talking true AI. No, not a robo voice, but a true AI with like a human rollover backup.
So
Like,
yeah. Did you ever watch? I don't know what happened to this technology. Google did a demo years ago for something called Google Duplex, and it was basically, if you had a Google device, this was the plan, you could have it call real people for you and speak as though it were a person, and it'd do all the ums and breaks in like English speech, and it would be totally convincing. So the demo actually was, one of them was booking a table at a restaurant. They press a button, it calls up a restaurant, says, hi, I'd like to get a table for 2, please. And then the other person, who was a live person, would say, what day? And they'd say, well, we're thinking maybe on Tuesday. And then the real restaurant person would say, we don't have anything on Tuesday. Well, how about Wednesday maybe? And it would actually have a full-blown conversation, right? It almost passes the Turing test. You have no idea that it was actually a robot that was doing the talking.
right.
So
Right.
if it's AI that if it's a robo voice that consumers don't realize they're talking to a robot, it's moot because they're just talking to a person in their mind at that point. But if they think they're talking to a series of prompts, forget it. It's a terrible experience, right? It's so
Yep.
frustrating for so many people. So I know we want to save money and find ways to do that, but it has to be an amazing experience. You're going to piss off your customer. I mean, that's just, it's basically the story. And, we are in the hospitality industry. Our job with delivery is not just to get food to the customer's door, but for them to have a great experience along every step of the way, including everything that happens after the food arrives at the door, starting the whole thing off with robo voice and, agent, representative is just, it's terrible in my mind. And maybe it's worth it in some cases, but if you want to maximize, the customer experience, it's probably not the best first step to take. You might actually discourage some consumers from even calling in the first place. They know they're going to have to talk to a machine. There is a thing where some of those robo IVR systems, they listen for profanity. So if you start screaming profanity at your phone, it'll actually get you a human agent faster because they don't want you to be upset. So that's your life hack, I guess. Next time you're on hold, and just start yelling at your phone, and you might get somebody. So people are swearing at your AI system. They're not actually mad. They just want an agent, basically. So again, I know we've gone the full hour, and I apologize for doing this from a car. I promise you I'm not driving. You don't see the background changing much. So I'm still safe, and hopefully we're all a little bit more informed today. And if I or Datassential can be of help, please reach out. We'd love to continue supporting you as much as we can.
That's great. Thanks, Jack. We really appreciate the time today, and for everybody else participating. Eric, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, Lo, is Lo on?
I am here, correct.
I know you close this. I know you're going to be sharing some of this with everyone.
I will, absolutely. You will get a communication where you will have a link to the recording, and with Jack blessing, if we can share the deck, if that's okay. Awesome. So give me a week or so, but this will be heading your way, and looking forward to see everybody next month.
Perfect.
Thanks, Lo. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
great month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.